Hi, everybody. This is Mr. Schaefer. I hope you're doing well. I hope you're staying safe. I miss you guys, but we've been asked since we can't be in school, put together some online content. I've never done this before, so I hope it goes well. I hope you like this. I hope you learn something from it. If you remember in class, the last thing we were studying was Africa. So this was going to be the next slideshow I was going to share with you. So where we're at is about the mid 1800s, and if you notice all these European flags that I have flying over the continent, if you remember from other lessons in class, you can probably guess where the story's going. It's going to imperialism. In the 1880s, Europe came knocking on Africa's door, just as they had many other places: North America, South America, East Asia, India. That's kind of late in the game for India. If you remember the other lessons, in other countries, Europe came in much earlier. So why so late in Africa? Well, don't think they didn't try. They did, but most of their attempts had proved unsuccessful. Europe did find success setting up trading posts along the coast, but they didn't dare go inland. The problem they kept running into was diseases, ones that they just hadn't built up an immunity to: malaria, yellow fever, and sleeping sickness, to be specific. One of the most famous examples of a European that did go to inland Africa is Dr. Livingstone. He's famous for being a doctor, a missionary, and an explorer. Another reason he's famous is his obsession with finding the source for the Nile River, and he's the first European to ever travel from one side of Africa to the other. Along the way, Dr. Livingstone became the first European to see the world's largest waterfall. That's Victoria Falls. Well, that's what he named it. Another story of Dr. Livingstone's time in Africa is that he lived with villagers in Botswana, and he found the villagers had a problem, and that was lion attacks. And he said, "Well, I have your solution. I have this gun." He said, "Once we take down one of the lions, the others will see it and they'll leave us alone." So he went and tried to put his plan into action. He found a lion and he shot it, but the plan didn't go exactly as he thought. The lion didn't die. Instead, it got back up and attacked him. The lion would eventually die, but not before really hurting Dr. Livingstone. He would live through it, but his arm would never be the same. It would hurt him the rest of his life. Another thing Dr. Livingstone is famous for is that he was lost for about 6 years. The world thought he was dead. An American newspaper, the New York Herald, sent explorer Henry Morton Stanley to go find him. And against what had to be some long odds, he did actually find him. And there's a famous story in history when he meets Dr. Livingstone. Morton says, "Dr. Livingstone, I presume." It's a phrase maybe you've heard in movies. It's kind of entered the American lexicon, something you say when you meet someone that you've only ever heard tell of before. So, did Dr. Livingstone ever find the source of the Nile? No. He died of malaria. According to legend, he died praying that he would find the source of the Nile. Livingstone is often considered a hero in Great Britain. He once told a friend that he had hoped only to find the source of the Nile because he thought it would make him famous, that people would listen to his ideas. And the idea he was most concerned with was ending slavery and ending the slave trade. So that raises the question, what is the source of the Nile? Well, I tried to find it, and I don't know that I could come up with a concrete answer. The best answer I have for you is it's a lot of things. Some folks say Lake Victoria, but it's more complicated than that because Lake Victoria also has many sources that feed that. So the best answer I have for you is it's a lot of things. By the 1880s, things had started to change, and Europe decided to make another go at colonizing Africa. So I know you've written down this definition probably 5 times at least. Imperialism is a strong country taking over a weaker one. And I'm sorry to say it's going to happen again here. This in history they often call new imperialism because the reasons for it were a little bit different. You can divide the reasons into 6 categories: economic, technological, social, political, intellectual, and religious. So, economical reasons, the world had changed. The slave trade had become unprofitable and it was outlawed in a lot of places. Africa, Africa became a source for Europe's raw materials, though, specifically cotton, copper, iron, palm oil, peanuts, rubber, and timber. There were also technological changes that made going into Africa more practical. One of them was the invention of the railroad. It made it easier for Europe to control larger areas. Another is the invention of the steamship. Once the Suez Canal was put in, if you can see it there on the map. Once the Suez Canal was put in, it opened up a new area of trade for Europe, and that combined with the steamship made colonization much more appealing. And another invention was the Maxim machine gun. This, again, unfortunately, made colonization easier for Europe. So this is the Suez Canal. So for social reasons, um, when Europe switched to being an industrialized nation, it actually led to a lot of unemployment, poverty, and homelessness. So Britain had what they called a surplus population, as cruel as that term sounds. They decided that this group, this unemployed folks struggling with poverty and homelessness, that they would just send them to Africa. Political reasons as well. Nationalism is another one of those vocab words you've written down several times, and it comes up again. Taking over another country comes with a lot of prestige, and of course, there's the idea if we don't take it, someone else will. Actually, in Great Britain, there was even an ABC book for kids. ABC's for Baby Patriots. And if you go to C in the book, C is for colonies. Rightly, we boast that of all the great nations, Great Britain has the most. Uh, Another reason they say is intellectual. It just means some changes in philosophy at the time. And one of those philosophies is social Darwinism. Social Darwinism is just the idea of survival of the fittest. Another reason, to be honest, is racism, which would have been prevalent in Europe at the time. I have a quote here from a British professor. He says, "The path of progress is strewn with the wrecks of nations. Traces are everywhere to be seen of the slaughtered remains of inferior races. Yet these dead people are in very truth the stepping stones on which mankind has arisen to the higher intellectual and deeper emotional living of today." And another quote here for you. "To the development of the white man, the black man and the yellow must ever remain inferior. And as the former raised itself higher and yet higher, so did these latter seem to shrink out of humanity and appear nearer and nearer to brutes." These are, of course, philosophies that we would be considered completely out of place today. Unfortunately, they were around 100 years ago, though. Another reason for more imperialism during this time is religion. Europeans, many of them thought they had a moral responsibility to civilize what they called ignorant people. Rudyard Kipling, who's a famous author, one of the most famous British authors, he wrote The Jungle Book. He also wrote a poem called The White Man's Burden, in which he described it was Europe's burden to pass on Christianity and civilization. Thousands of Catholic and Protestant missionaries went to Africa. This time period is often called New Imperialism. It differed from older imperialism in that more countries got involved. And another thing you see is they took over. Whereas in the past, Europe was maybe just interested in the trade. Here you see Europe coming in and not wanting to leave. So that's where I'm going to stop here. That's part one of the story. So unfortunately, it's a little bit of a sad story, but I hope you still learn something from it. And I'll see you tomorrow here for part two. Take care, everybody.